hereby call to order the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, August 5th, 2024. Mr. City Manager, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Etten.
Present.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Here.
Councilmember Groff.
Here.
Councilmember Strawn.
Here.
Mayor Rowe.
Here. And with us at the dais, by way of introduction, we have our City Attorney, City Attorney Rachel Tierney. I almost said our City Attorney, Rachel Tierney. On my right, I'm a little rusty here, so bear with me. And then City Manager Pat Trudgeon on my left at the end of the dais. We also have a number of department heads, staff, and guests who will participate in the meeting and be introduced as various agenda items come up. Would remind folks, if you've got a cell phone, to silence it or otherwise assure that it doesn't disrupt the meeting. And I believe that is all we need to cover by way of housekeeping, given we don't have a substantial amount of members of the public here this evening. So with that, we'll ask folks to stand if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next on tonight's agenda is approval of the agenda. And I'll just double check with folks in the room. Can you hear okay in the back of the room? Okay, good. Once again, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from a staff perspective, Mr. Trudgeon?
There is not, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Are there any requested changes from the council or items the council would like removed from the consent agenda for separate consideration this evening?
No.
Does not appear to be the case. Then a motion to approve the agenda as presented would be in order.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Groff, second by Councilmember Schroeder. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We have our agenda for this evening. Next on our agenda would be an opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to items that are not on this evening's agenda, but may be of interest to people in the community or related to city business, once again, that we are not taking up this evening. It doesn't appear that we have any members of the public with us this evening, so after having made that announcement, I think we can proceed on that presumption that we don't have anybody to speak from the public this evening, and we can move right into our agenda. We don't have any recognitions or donations or any items removed from the consent agenda, so we can proceed right into our business items. Our first business item this evening is item 7A, which is to consider accepting a proposal from Inspiring Sight for strategic planning services. And I'll turn it over to City Manager Trudgeon to introduce this item. Mr. Trudgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you mentioned, we're here tonight for the council to consider approving or accepting the proposal from Inspiring Sight for strategic planning as way of background, and we go into this in the staff report, but as a result of Envision Roseville, we came up with community aspirations, which were approved by the council in April. We now want to link those community aspirations to our strategic plan, and the next step would be to hire a consultant to help facilitate all that. As part of the process, we did send out feelers to several companies to have a pre-meeting to talk a little bit about what our expectations were, and specifically the Envision Roseville process and the community aspirations. Thanks to Mayor Rowe and Councilmember Schroeder participating in those meetings. Of the 5 that we did end up talking to, 4 submitted proposals. They were Center for Policy Planning and Performance, Q Life, Inspiring Sight, and RAP Consultants. Once we had those proposals, a subcommittee consisting once again of Mayor Rowe and Councilmember Schroeder, as well as myself, Assistant City Manager Rebecca Olson, Community Development Director Janice Gunlock, and Equity and Inclusion Manager Antonio Montez, reviewed and scored all of those proposals and also conducted interviews with each of those proposers. We do have the raw scores as attachment 4 in there if you want to refer to that. We also have all the proposals in the packet. Based on the review and the scoring as well as the interviews, consensus was reached by the subcommittee that Inspiring Sight would be the best firm to conduct our city's strategic planning process. And the reasons are enumerated in the packet, but they really have focus on change management, which is so crucial for strategic planning to make sure you change the ways you're doing things. They have some good supplemental services, specifically around implementation of the plan. They focus on systems. They have a lot of experience in facilitation. They have an innovative approach, we felt, is also tailored to exactly what we're looking for. While they don't have a lot of direct municipal experience, we felt that they bring some fresh ideas and processes, and that's the benefit, to think a little bit differently. They also seem to be very flexible on their approach and would adjust as necessary throughout the process. And also they had alignment with the city's equity goals. So from the qualitative, that certainly rose to the top. They did, Inspiring Sight. We look at the cost. Once again, we have this in the packet. The cost for the services range from $6,600 to $36,500. Inspiring Sight's base cost is $28,500. There are some a la carte items that they offered as a possibility. And I would mention that one thing that the subcommittee felt that we may want to have some assistance in implementing the strategic plan, and that was another $4,300. So we think that should be part of the consideration tonight, which would raise that total cost to $32,800. I would also note, as you can see from the table, there is a varying amount of hours that are put forth by the consultant, and certainly Inspiring Sight has a lot of hours compared to the others as well. That doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be a better product, but we were encouraged by that they would spend this sufficient amount of time to help guide us. The costs, as I mentioned, if we go with the a la carte for the session to help facilitate the implementation, would be $32,800. In our 2024 budget, we did allocate $30,000 for this service, so we're pretty close. I would mention that we did fund that, however, through the use of reserves, since this is kind of a one-time cost and not through levy. So we would need to use the reserves for that, and that's been factored in to the budget that way. So probably the next step, and certainly be happy to answer any questions, would be to accept the proposal and then allow us to bring back a contract for final approval by the council. There is a strategy design session to help firm up the scope that would be conducted with myself and Assistant City Manager Olson, as well as Inspiring Sight, just to flesh that out, and we can bring that information back as part of that contract approval. So that is the quick summary of that. Mary Kay Delvo of Inspiring Sight is here, and maybe she wants to come up and introduce herself and say a few words, but certainly happy to answer any questions as well.
All right, but we'll start with questions, see if council members have questions for staff or certainly for the proposed consultant. Council members, questions? Councilmember Otten.
I appreciate all the work that the subcommittee did and the proposer did. I would love to hear more from the subcommittee or staff on how you think this is going to be different and kind of crosses that barrier with not having any municipal experience.
Councilmember Schroeder, I don't know if you'd like to take a stab at that, but I can certainly as well.
Well, actually, I think it's not who the clients are, it's how their approach is, and I think that's more important, because if you look at, and let me back up, every one of these firms had something to offer, so they were all had some good points. But this particular firm, their approach actually seemed to be better for our city and what we're trying to do, especially since we've never done this before. And if you look at, some of the other ones have done, and of course, I think you were here when they did the one strategic plan before. That one was somebody who had lots of experience, and that ended up not being the product that you wanted in the end.
Yes.
And so therefore, we felt that their approach and facilitating, the ability to do that, and also the different approaches made more sense than who their clients have been in the past.
Okay, thank you.
And I think the only thing I would add is that it seemed in some of the, both the interview process as well as in analyzing proposals, that a couple of the folks that had a lot of municipal experience, it almost seemed as if their own experience in municipal government, as well as perhaps their experience with other clients going through this process, was sort of steering the process more than we might like to have that. And their understanding of where we were at was not as clearly informed by sort of the information we provided to all of the consultants as it was by their own perspective and experience. And so that was just a bit concerning as we looked at the different alternatives. And so if that helps to answer that.
Yep, thanks. Great.
All right. Other questions from council members?
I don't have any questions.
All right. Does Mary Kay want to introduce herself and have a seat at the table? And
All right. Does it matter which microphone?
it doesn't. They just automatically pick you up.
All right, and I still have to lower it, even when I'm sitting down. I'm Mary Kay Delvo. I own Inspiring Sight, and really honored to have the opportunity to interview with you and to potentially have my proposal accepted. I was super impressed by the staff and council members and mayor that were as part of the interview process. This organization is very forward-thinking and open-minded, and that is my perfect client to work with because I'm going to push and challenge. And to address your question about not having municipal experience, in my experience, not having experience in the specialty, the sector, whatever it is, industry, in many ways helps me be better at my job because I don't know how it is in the city. I don't know, I don't have those preconceived blinders on about, well, this is how it always works in municipalities. So I come in with fresh eyes, and I have worked with municipalities. I ran a nonprofit where a municipality was our fiscal agent. So I worked very closely with them in that setting. I was a school board member myself. So while not a municipality, a public, in the public sphere, the open meeting, all the stuff that that also applies to municipalities, I had to follow as a school board member as well. So I'm familiar enough, but I'm not mired in it. And so that helps me bring better questions to you. And my approach is also not that I'm going to come in and tell you what to do. I'm going to come in and challenge you to make sure when you make a decision about what you're going to do, you know why you made it. And you can explain that to your stakeholders, your community members, and each other and staff. So I'm going to push you to really make sure that you're making decisions for the long term that all connect with your mission. And in my experience, that helps people feel really confident about the plan that they decide on. There's more buy-in that way. And it also gives you all the talking points you need to share with people why you did what you did, because you've really thought it through and been tested on it in advance of making that decision.
All right. Well, thank you again for being here this evening and being prepared to answer questions. And I will just double check with council members. It looks like Councilmember Redden, you have a
I have a
question.
really important thing. Councilmember Strawn and I are looking forward to singing with Ms. Gleason, your partner.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
hope she's working, preparing for the trio.
Oh, she will. She
Okay.
will. She'll be.
And
very
we understand that is one of the a la carte services that we'll have to
It says,
So, yeah.
sing trio with council members.
We'll be prepared.
Okay.
And discussing Jeopardy.
And maybe
Well, I'm not very good at that.
I was going to say some of the
Well,
rest of
that's
us,
where
some of the
I'm-
rest of us could join in and ruin it too. So,
All right.
but anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
With that, thank you again. We do have the request before us to authorize going ahead with this consultant, and obviously, as Mr. Trudgeon said, we would bring back a contract and some more information as part of that first step in the process. Council thoughts, motion, Councilmember Groff.
I'd make a motion to accept to begin the proposal.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn. Discussion on the motion. As the maker of the motion, Councilmember Groff.
Well, there were a bunch of, many things in here. That's a lot of reading. I did read through them all. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Schroeder, for doing that, because it was a lot to sort through. But I was determined to do it because we're spending quite a bit of money, and I wanted to be sure what we're doing is going to be worth it. And I just want to comment on Councilmember Etten's comment, because that did go through my mind, too. I thought, I wonder why, and then I thought through it, and I came up with the exact answer that Mrs. Delvo said about sometimes people get in, that's their specialty, and they get in a rut, and they said, okay, this is the template for this kind of a city, and this is where we're going. And we don't, at least I don't want that. I feel like we need to have fresh eyes on this. I really want this to be successful. I think we as department heads and as the council have to really make a commitment here to participate strongly, because this is only going to be as good as what we do as council members so it's going to be some work.
Oh,
But I think
yes.
the end could be very, very positive. So there's my long endorsement of why I'm voting for it.
and persuasive. Councilmember Strawn is the seconder of the motion.
Yes, and I'd like to echo a lot of those same sentiments, but I really appreciate both of your ideas bringing forward, as well as Councilmember Etton's questions. Those were mine as well. We are picking the one that doesn't have, but it makes really good sense that we look outside of that, and I think as long as it focuses on our mission as a city, I think there was just ongoing disappointment with where we left off in the past. And so I'm really excited for us to do better. And I think the community requires it of us in this situation. And rather than just let it be another study, oh, we did that. Now we really take it. Now that actually the hard work begins for us to make sure we look ahead and plan well beyond the lifespan of us on this council. And I appreciate that forward thinking and the ability to maybe look beyond just us as people who live in Roseville, but the wider community. So I thank you, and you got your work cut out, Brad. Thank you.
Well, don't scare her away.
Wait, she didn't sign yet. Oh, it's gonna be great. We're easy.
Other discussion on the motion, Councilmember Schroeder.
I just want to say, and thank you for letting me be on the subcommittee. It was a really good experience for me, and I felt that the subcommittee had different ways of looking at this, and we all had our different takes on how it came. And it was a lot to go through, but we did multiple rounds of interviews, the first one and the second one, and then. But to me, it's really important, the facilitation piece of it, and I just think it is going to be a lot of hard work, and you have to have who's leading this process. This has to be someone strong and gentle at the same time to be able to get this process to work, because it will take time and it'll be uncomfortable at times, but I think getting through it, we can end up with a great product if everybody.
Will Rachel have to be part of a group hug?
But we're gonna have some not fun times too. That's for sure. Anyway.
I'm sure. Get you the mixer game ahead of time.
Anyway, so I feel comfortable with who we ended up choosing, because I saw the process behind the scenes and looked at the other vendors and again, they all had something to offer. It's just this particular approach, I think, is the one that's best suited for our city. So that's my piece on it.
Excellent. I have nothing further to add. I appreciate all your thoughts.
All right. And I just wanted to note two things. One is it's important to emphasize or acknowledge the great starting point, I think, that we got from our community as a result of that effort to update our community aspirations, and the specific part about asking the community, how would you measure success in these various areas? Because while it sort of can seem kind of nebulous, at least it gets us something to focus on and try to refine and work towards how we can actually measure our performance, and that can work us then towards what we do to get there. So I think that's a great starting point that we have from the community, and it's important to note that. And I think that's what we'll be honoring as participants in the process, is that starting point that we got from the community. And the other thing, just in terms of this decision-making process, one thing that was interesting, and it doesn't always happen, is that I think going into once we sort of finished the interviews and we started the discussion amongst the subcommittee, I don't think any of us knew where anybody else on the subcommittee was, and yet we all kind of, as we were checking off our thoughts on different consultants, we sort of all ended up at the same place. And so that was just kind of interesting to see that it wasn't sort of the hive mind doing it. It was more that we all came from our different perspectives, but we all ended up sort of with the same conclusion, which probably means that it's the right decision for us. So I'm glad that the council is supportive of the recommendation. And with that also long-winded argument in support of the motion, we do have the motion before us to accept the proposal from Inspiring Sight and proceed into the contract and the next step. With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that is approved. And we'll look forward to this coming back to the council shortly, because there is a calendar of things that have to start happening very soon. So clear your calendars as participants and be ready.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you all.
All right, that then brings us to our second business item this evening, which is to receive an update from the fire department in relation to staffing study And this is a follow-up on a discussion we had earlier this year as this topic was brought before the council. And I won't steal too much thunder in terms of background, but I know that initially there was some talk about, we had a deadline coming up earlier this year for potential to apply for some of the SAFER grant funding, I believe, for some potentially for additional firefighters. And I think the decision was made to kind of bring it to the council for some discussion and think about the next round as how we look at that and have a number of steps in between. And so this is sort of coming back to the council, as I understand it, with some feedback on some of the things we talked about in our last discussion. And before I go too much farther and get into spoilers, I will turn it over to Chief Brosnahan to bring this back before us.
Thank you, Mayor Owen. Council, you were doing great. I was going to let you just keep going.
Yeah, I don't even know what the PowerPoint is, so it had to stop at some point.
Well, thank you for allowing me the time to present and kind of discuss the deliverables of the proposals. So going off of the May 20th council meeting that we had, we were kind of directed to go out and look for proposals for a staffing study, and we received 2 back, which I'll jump into in just a little bit. So kind of the idea behind tonight is to, or at least my objective with all of you tonight, is to provide an overview of the 2 consultants that provided deliverables and costs to perform a staffing study. Kind of go over from a very high overview of their methodology and process for providing a final report and recommendations, and then discuss and decide how to best move forward. And so overall, my goal as I'm here tonight, from my perspective of the council, in no way to oversimplify, is we essentially have 2 paths. Would you like us to pursue a consultant? Yes or no? If yes, which one of the 2 that we have here? And if no, what can we do as a group moving forward to make sure that we still are addressing our current understaffing and deployment issues that we're having at the fire department, meeting the call volume demand. With that being said, we're here tonight, and we talked about the May 20th meeting. The Assistant Chief and I presented at length to all of you in regards to call volume growth, demand, overlapping calls, and we expressed concerns meeting the needs of emergency response in Roseville. Currently, the 911 demand is outpacing the available fire and EMS resources, and so we are at our capacity we currently have. So from that discussion, council directed me to seek deliverables and costs from consultants that perform staffing studies. Reached out to 3 total consultants provided here below. So Citygate, Raftellus, and Fitch & Associates. I did not receive any feedback from Fitch & Associates, so we went with the 2 that did. So these 2 provided proposals back to me pretty promptly. And so we asked for deliverables and essentially their costs, and they provided full proposals. I know that we didn't do an official RFP process with this, but this is what we got from my ask that I had of them. So our consultants that we have, first one is Citygate. They're out of Northern California. Their project manager that we'd be working closest with is Stuart Gary. There's a bio of him in the proposal, kind of his background and what he's done in cities he's worked with. Citygate has worked a lot in Minnesota, provided a number of staffing studies over the years, especially over the last 5 to 8 years, as you've seen more cities and municipalities transition to a full-time staffing model. Most recently performed a study for the city of Shakopee. That study was more of an organizational, holistic look at their entire fire department, as they were having some leadership, response, training, and retention issues, so not just focused on deployment and staffing as ours is or would be. Raftellus is our second proposal, based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Jonathan Ingram, also included in the proposal, would be our project manager. Raftellus recently performed staffing and response studies for Edina and Hopkins in just the last couple of years. This table here is kind of a brief summation of the deliverables from both consultants. Their methodologies are slightly different overall, but really, in general speaking, they're quite similar. And I think the end product between either one will still be quite similar to each other. Both would involve a lot of document and data sharing right up front through multiple in-person and virtual meetings. They describe that in their proposals. So providing current and historical data on staffing, call volume, budget, our standard operating procedures and guidelines, deployment model, dispatch information, hiring practices, et cetera. So it would be a big lift that first 2 to 6 weeks with either consultant that we choose. But I think one item to note also, which I thought was interesting, during the Conduct Fieldwork Activity 2 for Raftellus, they do interviews with all firefighters, so one-on-one interviews with all firefighters as well with several city staff, which I thought was a unique qualitative touch to go with kind of the quantitative side of their data collection. So the final product would be a detailed study of staffing and deployment needs now and into the future, obviously, for both of them. And obviously, there would be other pieces attached to it, a community risk assessment, final recommendations, as well as a roadmap for our implementation. And of course, a presentation here in front of City Council, which you can ask questions and clarifications on any items. Both consultants are in kind of that 4 to 6 month time frame. So when I originally reached out to them, we're talking a couple months ago, it was 4 to 6 months. I reached back out to both of them, so we'd be ready for this presentation, and both are still on that kind of that same time frame or same timeline to complete a full study. Again, they both worked with multiple agencies in the Twin Cities. Hopkins completed one in September of 2023, and then Shakopee was spring of 2024 for Citygate. The costs are listed below as well, about $68,000 for Citygate and about $72,000 for Raftellus. Be honest with you, it's a lot more expensive than I anticipated. And when the city manager and I had conversations back in kind of April and May leading up to the May 20th meeting here at council, I really believe we were somewhere in that $25,000 to $45,000 range. I think that's probably kind of the same area or that same idea I gave to the council that night. Because we were only looking for deployment and call volume essentially and your number of staffing. We weren't looking for GIS locations of appropriate fire stations or anything else as far as organizational structure or anything like that. Just looking for call volume and appropriate staffing. So I believed it was more in that 25 to 45, and so it's over that by quite a bit. And so that's something we should discuss about the return on the investment that we have for something like this. So with that being said, I wanted to just take 6 or 8 minutes so we'd have opportunities to have some Q&A and discussion on the 2 proposals that are before you. Much of the detail is in the RCA as well as, of course, the attached proposals. And so with that, I can open up for any questions or items that the council has.
All right, thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. And one thing I just wanted to clarify, too, do you have a sense as to how close the scope of these proposals matches sort of what you were expecting the scope to be? Do you have a sense that there's more in there than maybe we need to have?
There's a touch more in both
Okay.
than I think what we need to have. Would that be a drastic change in the cost? I don't believe so. I mean, I believe we can maybe take a little bit of money off that overall cost, but I think there was a few extra things that weren't probably that necessary within the proposals for both.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yep.
With that, other council members, Councilmember Strong, did you have?
This is a little snarky. Is Ms. Delvo available?
Now, this is an area where perhaps having some expertise may make some sense, and I'd hate to put her on the spot in that regard.
I just was wondering, Chief, based on what you were thinking that it was going to be, did you have some kind of, you were just not sure, or are there other consultants out there that you think that would be available in this price range that you're talking about?
I don't believe so. Now asking around, I reached out to the fire chiefs in Edina, Hopkins, and in South Metro, which is West and South St. Paul, and all of them said they ran into similar experiences that I had, is that they believed to be in that 40 to 50 tops, and they all paid the same amount we did or more. So I don't believe we can get much lower.
All right, other questions? Councilmember Schroeder?
Yes, thank you for putting this together, because I think before we could decide, it was a good idea to see what just like you said, nobody had an idea of what this was going to cost. And I keep thinking, well, what are we really getting for all this money? Because that's a lot of money. And when I look at the proposals, all the data that they are talking about, we already have, and we'd have to feed that to them. And then we already analyze so much of that in-house ourselves. So I keep thinking, what more could these consultants do that we're not already doing in-house? And so I think goes back to what you originally were talking about, if we should go with the consultant or not. I'm wondering if we should, and I see that's also in what you're asking the council to do, is I wonder if it makes sense to go back and say, well, what can we actually accomplish most of this with our data, with our staff now, without the consultant, and still end up in the same place? Because I'm not convinced to spend $80,000 is going to get us much more than what we'd get in-house, but that's just, what I was looking at. Maybe I'm missing something that we'd get for that money.
I don't know. I wouldn't say there's anything that you're missing. I think the biggest piece with a consultant, as there's one over my shoulder, I think it's more of the validation, the third party unbiased validation outside of, I can tell you till I'm blue in the face that we're understaffed and this is what our appropriate staffing number should be. You listen to me, but also when all of a sudden somebody else tells you, it's kind of like your kids, right? My kids drive me crazy, but then their best friend's parents are like, man, your kid's the best kid in the world. And I'm like, this kid? Are you sure? So I think it's that third party validation that we get from somebody that's maybe unbiased into the whole process that helps us. The other piece to the consultant, at least that I like, is for futuristic planning. I like that they at least can provide a roadmap so that we can kind of see. But I also think if there is a good relationship between, the city manager, the fire chief, and the council, I think we could also come to our own roadmap as well.
80,000 a lot for validation.
It is a lot for validation. You're 100% correct. Yep.
So anyways, that's my thought.
Right, Councilmember Etten.
I agree, 80,000 is a lot for validation. I think Ms. Delvo has just increased her bid. Because she's going to do a whole lot more work than what's outlined in this bid, so. I'm going to address the first why in this discussion, the first split in this, and I don't see that we're getting anything near what we need to do, and I would rather trust this group that's sitting here right now to make these decisions. What we've heard is the volumes keep going up. It's really not a surprise. We've added a lot of high-density housing. We've added a lot of senior high-density housing. We know there are more medical calls there. This is part of, it brings, increase our tax base and sometimes then their costs that we need to incur to serve the people who are living here. So for me, I don't see these as worthwhile. I'd rather put the 80,000 into delivering something for the community, delivering services to the community. So I'm going to answer that. I have more thoughts, but maybe I'm just going to put myself there on that side of that split.
All right, and Councilmember Groff.
Similar thoughts, 72, 80,000, whatever it is. Is that about what it costs us to start a new firefighter?
It's very similar.
We would be spending more money.
It's the salary of a firefighter.
Yeah.
Salary, then benefits, then
Then you have
training.
It's a starting point.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it is money that will be going to this, and we would most likely get the answer. I mean, I don't know, but everything I see and what we've been looking at, the data that you've been bringing to us, is we're going to need new firefighters. I guess the only other thing, and I would put this out there, is, this would probably give us a roadmap or a template for down the road and more of a plan, but maybe we can do that without the consultant. I don't know if we can do that in-house, as Councilmember Schroeder said, or if we could do something like that, because I would like to have that as much as we can, even though we have been, as Councilmember Etten says, adding a lot of housing. Maybe we won't be doing quite as much of that right now. It looks like that's slowing down, so maybe we can take a breather and kind of make a plan for 3 to 5 years and say this is expected. Because when you add people, there's going to be more calls. That's just the way that business works. So those are my thoughts on it anyway.
Well, and I would just add before I do a second round with the council, the last 2 or 3 major changes that we made in the department, with the exception of the fire station location, which we did a study for, we did with recommendations that came sort of from an internal analysis and dialogue with the council. And so I appreciate the success we've had with that model of approaching things before. And so that was kind of where my perspective was when we had our discussion in May. And I think that the check-in was just to make sure that we're not sort of off base in that perspective. The concern I did want to check in with staff on, though, is it's one thing to say we can do it, but I want to make sure that in doing it in-house, we're not sort of sacrificing something else that we need to be doing, or we're putting ourselves in a place where our fire department management staff is working 80-hour weeks. Or 8 hours more
80.
than 80 hours more
Cutting
than they
back on my
work
time, man.
now. Yeah. That's the thing I wanted to ask, is just make sure we have capacities to do it with the staffing we have, because I think that's important to make sure we're not setting ourselves up for some trouble in that regard. So if you could maybe speak to that a little bit.
I appreciate that. No, I mean, and Councilmember Schroeder brought it up as well, as far as the data piece. I mean, we already mine and use that data almost on a daily basis through our records management system. So kind of building a program and getting an idea of call volume versus the number of firefighters that are appropriate on a daily basis, and providing you a strategic roadmap, I mean, I think we have the capacity to do that, and it would be a huge project and, you know, incredibly important for us, so it, of course, would be prioritized to something that we want to make sure that we can do.
All right. Great, thank you. Other Councilmember Strawn?
Two things. One, you know, the first thing I thought was, well, if we had a 0.5 person, a newbie, you know, that would be covered in this 68,000, you know, whatever. And that maybe would be something that could free up the time for our admin to be working on this project. But at the same time, you're developing and growing someone new. I just really do appreciate the thought of using the funds for our staff rather than for someone else. I have nothing against these consultants, but I feel like we do know what we want and what we need. I remember when I first started on the council, you and I met, and I asked about the per person rate of, you know, and I just want to make sure, you know, that we're calculating that, especially in relation to age of the person. So if we say, you know, we're bringing in this new multi-density, you know, multifamily housing, but everyone's going to be over 65. So I think having a really realistic monetary value, unfortunately, that's kind of, you know, a little bit gross to be coarse to think about it that way. But also, I think that is certainly something, as a new housing project is going up with, you know, 400 units, we can see what that impact is. And you had some pretty good ideas, but even moving forward, I'm sure now that we have the new folks and the new call volume, you probably even have better statistics on that.
Yeah, the exact number, it's probably a couple years old since we last ran a full detailed analysis of it, but what we're getting is 1.2 calls per unit at nursing homes. So if it's a 100-unit, you know, facility, we get 120 calls per unit at that site. For assisted living or 65 and older type facilities, we're at about 0.8 calls per unit per year. And then at just regular multifamily, it was about 0.25 is the number of calls per year per unit. So it's kind of how it broke down. But we can definitely, you know, work on getting you know, more firmer numbers. But that's about 2 years old. Is those numbers?
Can you
that we
relate
have.
that to single family? I mean, is the 0.25 very comparable to single family in terms of per unit because it's similar population?
It'd be less than that.
Oh, okay.
It'd be quite a bit under that.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
But I
Yeah,
do
we do
know,
that.
I mean, it's helpful for us to be able to quantify as we look at approving these new, you know, because I think that more than anything is helping us predict, you know, we are pretty landlocked, our land isn't, but if we take a building that is currently commercial and it's turned into many units of housing, suddenly I just think that's really quickly changing, obviously, the whole boaters, you know.
Kind of like behind Byerly's, yes.
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
Or just, you know, east of Huntington Bank and Target there, it was an open grass, it used to be a nursing home years ago. And it was a grass field, and now it's, you know, I'm not even sure how many total units off the top of my head, but,
Yeah.
you know, 100.
But anticipatory of that. So I think that's always going to be part of how we look ahead. But I think making sure that we also are reminded, you know, that it's not just another additional place on a, you know, a spot, but what does that mean? And is there any way that we can share that kind of responsibility with these? I don't know that there is, but, you know, it does help to make sure that we are grounded in all the pieces. It's not just a new piece of property, but they come with a need for services, fire and police and, you know, medical or whatever. And especially if we are looking at already delayed and pokey medical response, you know, as we look at larger places in the future. So,
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example, I don't have the exact number, but between the 3 new apartment buildings at the Boaters Mart area or behind Byerly's, we went there more than 400 times in 2023. So, or from summer of 2023 to summer of 2024. So that 12-month period of time.
Well, it's probably worth also, in addition to the single-family aspect of it, also comparing it to commercial properties. You know, retail tends to have a fair number of calls. Now, granted, it's a lot more of those maybe on the public safety side as opposed to the fire and medical. But there's no question that when you've got, 12 million people going to Rosedale every year, they don't all go through there without having unfortunate medical emergencies or those sorts of things.
Correct.
So there's still there's still a factor there, so, we need to understand kind of the whole picture there, not to mention the folks that are traveling through Roseville every day who need to be rescued from car accidents and have other medical issues, so it's all part of the picture. I think the thing that we also should mention is that in addition to adding more units of housing, not all of which are senior, we also just have an aging population. I think I mentioned it in our May discussion as well, and so that's a factor that's there. Even if we didn't have this recent development activity, which I agree we're probably sort of at the end of that cycle, given we don't have a lot more land available unless there's some conversion or additions at Rosedale and things like that. But we do need to sort of have a sense of what the future looks like. Councilmember Schroeder.
I just wanted to circle back to your comment, Mayor, about, will this take up too much staff time? And actually, it may take up less because with these, if you look at these proposals, the amount of data that would have to be put into their systems would be quite a slog. So I'm thinking for what it would take to take it and put it in and give it and to feed it to them, I think actually in a way it might take less time because it would stay in our systems. So I just wanted to make that comment as well.
Sure. No, that's a good point. Councilmember Etten.
The chief and I exchanged a few emails today, and as part of that, we talked about the starting point here is probably a couple more firefighters per shift and an apparatus for them to take out, right? If we don't have another apparatus, you're just putting more people in the same vehicle. They get stuck at the same previous call, right? So I really feel like you have a fantastic starting point, and then we see where other additions come in, how much that helps bring down the per firefighter call, right? How many calls are they getting in their shift? Because that's where the wear and tear comes from, right?
100%.
I want us to think about whether we are hiring EMTs instead of firefighters. I know that kind of changes in a fire response, but it also might take a lot of work off. They can be responding to a medical emergency. Firefighters can go to fire. As we look at how many total personnel we're going to have, we're going to be moving up that chain pretty fast. Is there a way to use medical-only people to take some of the load off of the fire specialists? So I want to think about those things, but I feel like you already have a pretty good idea of what's going to be the first step. So without doing a lot of analysis.
Sure, absolutely.
There's no way we're bringing this down without another vehicle and without a couple more bodies to be on that vehicle.
Yep, it truly makes no sense for us to add staffing to existing units. This is going to have to be an expansion of unit or units to meet the demand. Yep.
But I'm definitely glad that's being brought up too, because I would like to see as part of that the change to the CIP over the next 20 years, to fit that together. Taking advantage of some of the other savings that are coming from some of our other decision making potentially. But at the same time, we definitely would have to have the apparatus for the additional staffing. So important to account for all of that in the process. So that I think it sounds like we've got the capability to do that analysis. I think we at least had the very elementary understanding of it at the last discussion because we had the tables and we could see where other departments were. We could see what what the math would be in terms of additional firefighters, and then it just becomes, I think, a matter of figuring out how we phase it in so that it's not a year one 100% necessarily, because that can be quite a shock to the budgetary system, as you can imagine.
Yep, it would.
So is that kind of the sense of the council then, Councilmember Groff?
I would agree with that, but I do want to say thank you for doing this anyway, because it helps me clarify in my mind what the costs are and what the trade-offs are. So this helped me with the decision.
So I guess we guys can discuss that, but I guess what's the next steps? Would I come back in 4 to 8 weeks with a plan to discuss with you, or with timelines, or what would you
Are
like?
you suggesting you can come back in 4 to 8 weeks with? I mean,
This
we
is
don't
what
want
I
to
do.
say
This is
yes,
my
do
job.
that,
What
and
are you
then it
doing
takes
next Monday?
and then it takes you, a longer period of time. I think we can only respond to
5 months.
Right. We can only respond to what you tell us you can do. I think. So let's start with that.
Okay. I'll meet with the city manager this week or tomorrow. I think we have a meeting, and maybe we can come up with an appropriate plan. But I think
that would be a fair next step, is to come back to us maybe at a subsequent meeting with a little more details as to a plan. Councilmember Schroeder.
When is that?
Councilmember Strawn, I'm sorry.
When is our not to exceed budget due?
The end of September, so I think it's September 25th, 23rd meeting. Although I would say what we're really trying to do is set ourselves up so we can be in line for SAFER grant that applications in July, I'm sorry, in January.
January.
So I'm not sure we would be in a position to do anything to add to the 25 budget, which
Okay.
we'll be considering.
Right. I didn't get the sense that this was a 2025 budget item necessarily, other than if we get a grant to do some funding for early stages.
It's just really hard if you're already stretched. That's why, wanted to
Well,
make
we discussed in the May 20th meeting, I mean, this is short and long-term. It's, I guess, your definition of what is short-term, but we do have some short and long-term items to address, but I think we can be patient and we can talk offline about approaches.
Let's try to see if we can get an agenda item then at a subsequent meeting, and you can work out kind of what the timing of that is and bring that back. Right?
Great.
Agreed.
Any other discussion on this item? Are we
Thank you.
steering you wrong?
No.
Okay, all right. Just always want to check in and double check on that.
Appreciate your time, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Thanks to everyone who's been working on this behind the scenes, too. That concludes our business items this evening. We do have a couple of items more administrative in nature. One is consideration of some council and EDA minutes. And I will note that I will have to be abstaining on the votes relative to the July 15th meeting. So my suggestion was maybe we take a motion on the July 8th minutes for the council, and then a subsequent motion related to the others. Are there any changes or corrections to the July 8th minutes?
meeting.
Or a meeting,
I'll
or a
move
motion?
approval of the July 8th meeting minutes.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Atten, seconded by Councilmember Schroeder to approve the July 8th meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Those minutes are approved. And as to the July 15th council and EDA minutes, two sets of minutes, is there a motion related to those or any changes, corrections needed to those?
I move approval on both.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Atten to approve both sets of minutes for the 15th, the council and the EDA, as presented. Discussion on that motion. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And I abstain, so that passes 4-0 with Rowe abstaining. All right, those minutes are then approved. That brings us to our consent agenda. Mr. Trudgeon, if you can give us a rundown of the consent items for our consideration this evening.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10A approves payments in the amount of $1,234,043.08. Item 10B approves 3 temporary liquor licenses, one for Alarm Product Distributors at 2341 St. Croix Street for a product show on August 15th, one for the Friends of Roseville Parks for the Tapped and Uncorked event that will be held on September 13th, and one for St. Rosa Lima Church for a block party on September 21st. Item 10C approves purchases that include the maintenance and painting of the apparatus doors at the fire station, the purchase of a new skid steer snow blower to replace a 2005 unit, the purchase of a variable frequency drive for the Walsh Storm Water Lift Station to better control the operation of that lift station, and finally, the expenditure, there's an expenditure to replace the existing fountain at the Arboretum. As noted, that there, we have some budgeted costs, but the remainder of that will be paid through donations from a variety of individuals. This action also authorizes the sale of the 2010 fire engine for $135,000. Item 10D receives the second quarter financial report. Item 10E approves the issuance of a request for proposal to solicit bids for a new recreation management software system. Item 10F approves granting a utility easement for Arvig Enterprises for a fiber optic line on Fairview Avenue. Item 10G approves an agreement with the Roseville School District for the city to provide 2 school resource officers to the Roseville schools for the 24-25 school year. Item 10H authorizes the mayor and city manager to execute the Fourth Amendment to the joint cooperation agreement with Ramsey County Housing and Redevelopment Authority. Roseville has been part of this agreement since 1985, and the county is required to renew this on a periodic basis from time to time. This agreement will allow Roseville to receive the Federal Community Development Block Grant funds, as well as the Home Investment Partnership Act funds as well. And finally, item 10E accepts a very generous donation of $15,000 from Marine Dermatology to the fire department. The donation will be spent on community programs, including Fridays with Firefighters and Ashes or Mental Health Care Therapy Canine, as well as other outreach programs. And that is the consent agenda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Atten. Discussion on the motion?
I'd just like to mention that in addition to the donation by Terene Dermatology, as a patient, they send text reminders of your appointment, and if you are going to miss your appointment without calling in, they indicate that $50 will be charged to you and go to the fire department. I would assume that not $15,000 worth of people canceled their appointments without, but I do know.
They do have a fund.
But they do have a fund, but it's really nice they're bringing awareness in the community and share a little bit with a link to what the fire department does for the, so I just wanted to acknowledge that it's not just a donation, it's like a great resource to share what we're doing in our city, so.
Oh, glad to know that. Other discussion on the motion to approve the consent items? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Those items are approved or received. That brings us to the future agenda review. Mr. Trudgeon, once again, on the future agenda.
Yes, just for the remaining month of August, we have one regular meeting and a couple other special meetings. So on August 16th, which is a Friday, we would have a quick special meeting to canvass the primary election. We'll hold that here in this room at 12 noon. August 18th is a regular scheduled meeting. We'll have the city manager budget presentation, as well as agreeing to go update and talking about the results and talking about the next steps to get something going in regards to an ordinance on that. August 20th, this is a very busy week for the council. We have a joint school district city council meeting. The meeting itself starts at 6:30 p.m.
5:30.
Well, the school board meeting is going to start at 5:30 with public comment. They're going to have a quick business meeting at 6 o'clock, and then our joint meeting will start at 6:30. So please make sure you try to arrive by at least 6:15.
Yeah.
Good advice. And then finally, in the month of August, on the 21st, potentially the 22nd, would be commission interviews for the Equity and Inclusion Commission. We only have, I believe, 5 that have submitted, so please get the word out. We're doing our part on the staff side, certainly pushing that out, but as you interact with folks, please get them on there. We may have to have a check-in on August 19th on that, depending on what amount of applicants we have, so that might be a possibility. We do have 3 meetings in September. I'm on here doing regular business as we always do in September, including the not-to-exceed budget that was mentioned by Councilmember Strong last meeting of the month. That's the future agenda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Trudgeon. And it's worth noting, as we have that August 16th meeting to canvass the primary election, that is because we have a primary election coming up, and it includes the City of Roseville Council seats. And so we encourage folks to participate in that election. I believe early voting is underway already, because it's got to be if it's August 13th is Election Day, because we do provide in Minnesota quite a long period of early voting. So that's at the library, I think, in Roseville. So we encourage people to participate in the primary. I know primaries tend to have fairly low turnout, but it's important that folks voice their opinions through their votes. Also, other announcements or communications from council members?
Tomorrow night is Night to Unite, block parties throughout the city. So if someone's blocking your way, go be polite and go around and
Or join the party.
or join the party.
Right.
Mayor?
Councilmember Ed.
No, just on a note, and I know Councilmember Strawn reached out today. We'll provide a map and a listing of all the parties. We'll send it out tomorrow.
Thanks.
Google Maps, so you can
Good.
refer to it. So-
Thank you.
Okay, great. Councilmember.
I realized that we're not going to have a regular meeting before this, so on Saturday, August 17th, 11 a.m., I don't know how people
Yeah.
run it, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. is the Rice and Larpenteur Summer Block Party, which is a great time. Lots of services, kid activities, a climbing wall, local food, and it'll be great. So
And are we
17th,
having music
Saturday,
again
17th.
from the folks at Wobleski's?
Wobleski's Blues Saloon. I met their owner just this last week at
Right.
the new Cancun Cantina across the street.
That's,
So,
I,
Is it going to be in the parking lot like it's been
in the
before?
parking lot,
Yep.
yep.
Yep, it's a great community event. It really seems to be
Yep.
helping to bring those 3 cities, that neighborhood together as a community. Councilmember Strong.
I'd like to add, they had one meeting so far for Lexington Park's park rebuild for next year, and lots of good input
For the playground rebuild.
for the playground, and including 3 or 4 young people with very strong opinions, so it was really enjoyable. But they will be kind of coming back with their 2 top display items at the Party in the Park, or Discover Your Parks on August 14th. So I encourage people to go.
That'll be at Lexington Park.
It'll be at Lexington Park, and even if it rains and the Discover Your Parks event is canceled, inside the park building will be this kind of getting near the end piece. So make sure if you have an opinion or you have things that you'd like to see and kind of help make the choice between the two. But there's some pretty exciting designs on there. And again, we've had some great, Maria and Thor, I believe are their names, who are helping with the accessibility pieces to it. And they're really impactful, and Mr. Matt Johnson is doing a fabulous job, as he does.
All right. Other announcements or communications?
I just thought we should mention that the Equity Inclusion Manager did send out a very nice flyer about the openings on the commission, so pass those along to people or
Yep.
post them
Yep.
if you can.
And it's got graphics, you can put it on
And it's
social
got a-
media, and
It's got you can do the scan on there and get all the information.
Yep. And that's for our Equity and
Do
Inclusion
we have
Commission.
those to take with us to block parties tomorrow night?
I think that's a question for Mr. Dredgen.
I don't have any right now. We can get some for you if you like. We can
Okay.
print some off.
Okay.
And it is a printable thing, because I did print it off some on my.
But we can certainly print them off here. So maybe make it easier.
That'd be great. We can bring it
Right.
with us tomorrow.
If there aren't any further announcements or communications, I did want to, just as a point of personal privilege, thank Acting Mayor Groff for filling in my absence, my unintended absence
Yes, that was a
on the
surprise.
15th, and then my intended absence on the 22nd. So I appreciate that, and all reports are that the meetings went well and that you did a good job. So appreciate
Finished
you
early.
filling in.
They were
Well,
all
you know,
pleased with that.
We really like him.
I want really smooth.
Sorry, Dan.
Really smooth.
You gotta be careful when you're out of town.
this is why I'm not absent very often.
Pay the price.
Nope. With that, if there's no further business before the council this evening, the only other item on our agenda is a motion to adjourn.
moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to adjourn. No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and we are adjourned at 6:56 PM. Thank you.